that their sovereignty has been attacked, because the consulate and the embassy is part of Iranian territory. But when they speak about an assassination of the leader, the Marty Haniya, they speak about their sovereignty, and number two, their national security, and number three, their prestige, and number four, and this is what the Israelis must understand, who still don't understand, their honor has been attacked. And you know what honor means. Now, the West and others, they don't understand honor and these other concepts, but let them understand these terminologies. Now, one time they say you attacked our sovereignty. That has a certain approach, our security, our national security, our prestige. But what are they saying now? Now they're saying you attacked you assaulted our honor, because the leader, the Marty Haniya, was our guest, and you killed our guest. In the East, and especially in the Islamic world, this is a completely different story, which requires a completely different approach. So this Israeli mindset, and for the society of this entity, which was joyful for a few days, no doubt, now they're in a state of joy. And they're proud of themselves that in a few hours we killed Sayyid Muhsin in Dahi in southern Beirut, and we killed the leader, the Marty Haniya, in Tehran, and a few days ago we struck Hudaydah in Yemen, and so they can't see in front of them because they're so proud. Okay, laugh a bit and you'll weep a lot, because you don't know what red lines you have crossed and what kind of aggression you carried out, and where you've taken the situation. Hence, yes, we, for the enemies and the friends, on all of these supportive battlefronts, now we've entered a new phase, different than the previous phase. And the escalation depends on the behavior of the enemy and the reactions of the enemy. Today, they are the ones who have to wait to await the rage of the honorable people, the revenge of the honorable people in the Ummah. For all of this blood, this oppressed blood, that's on the one hand. Now, I'll speak about the stance in the end. On the other hand, we have to underscore that any goal of assassination, we prevent this goal from being achieved. In the end, the Marty got what he wanted to, but we obstruct the goal. Usually, the goal behind assassinating a commander, whether it be a military commander, security, political leaders, jihadis, intellectuals, etc., is to try and undermine the determination of the wider group, to undermine its decision-making. The aim is to intimidate, to weaken, so that they would back down, to stop, to weaken, to go into a state of submission. That's usually the case when they kill our leaders or the leaders of resistance movements and others. Up until now, in any case, even in the entity, many people told Netanyahu, okay, you're happy now, but if you continue, will this stop resistance? No. Will it weaken the resistance? According to experience, it won't, and we'll pay the price. So what I want to say is that even some of the observers and the analysts and the Zionist commentators understand this fact. This is a fact. For example, if we look at Hamas today, now Hamas, its founding leader was martyred, Sheikh Ahmad Yassin, and leading figures in it, Marty al-Rantisi and other martyrs. and the martyrs, jihadi martyrs, Yahya Ayyash and others. And now they're depending on killing the leading commander, or they're pinning their hopes on killing Muhammad al-Daif, the leader, in order to also make an achievement. Okay, so Hamas, it's always, what is its trajectory? It's always upward. It's strengthening more and more. The Islamic Jihad, the commander who founded the first Secretary General, Dr. Fath al-Shukaki, they killed him. What's the trajectory of the Islamic Jihad? It's upward. So here we have Hezbollah. They killed our leaders, our Secretary General. They killed our great jihadi commander, Haj Imad Ghuniya. They killed many people. What's the trajectory? What's our trajectory? It's upward. So history tells us that this goal will not be achieved. Why? Because these parties that were targeted believe in God and the next world and the general approach and the message, and these parties are ready to sacrifice with what is most valuable to them and belong to a historic legacy, a great legacy which provides it with spiritual and moral energy, great energy and a great capability to put up with the hardships and difficulties and sacrifices and pains. Otherwise, how can you explain the families of the martyrs? And how do you explain this legendary steadfastness of the people of Gaza and South Lebanon and the peoples of our region? For 76 years. That is the explanation. The same applies to us. As I said, we felt great pain over the martyrdom of Sayyid Fuad. However, this will not undermine our will or determination, or our decision-making, or our determination and continuing on the same path. On the contrary, this will only, as I always said with the previous leader, the martyr leaders, this will increase our determination and commitment and will, and our proceeding forward, and will not change anything whatsoever. On the contrary, this makes us more strongly cling to the decision which we took here in this location, because they haven't seen the Sayyid, they haven't seen his face like many of our martyrs. Our martyrs from the jihadis, you get to know them after their martyrdom. Haj Muhsin, Sayyid Muhsin, Sayyid Fuad sometimes used to come at some nights to this location or to the Ashura, the place where the Ashura sermons were held, and shared with you and with the people in his chants and his sentiments and his stance. And today, as we speak and as we gather around him, he stood with you and raised his hands with you when we used to say to Hussein, may peace be upon him, on Ashura, Abi Abdullah, if we knew that we would be killed and then burnt and then hanged in the air, then be brought back to life and then killed, if this is done to us 70 times or 1,000 times, we would not abandon you, Hussein. Sayyid Fuad was with you. His voice was raised high with you, saying, I wouldn't abandon you, Hussein. To Sayyid Fuad, I say that you indeed chanted slogans from your heart, and you have reached Hussein, may peace be upon him. And we are with you, continuing on that same path, committing to this pledge. They say this would disrupt the structure. We, thank God Almighty, we have leaders, and we have generations of leaders. Now, because we got all together, I speak with some brothers, maybe we feel that we're still young, but many of our leaders are now in the 50s and the 60s, etc. Those who used to be young. The Sayyid Haj Muhsin, he started fighting the enemy when he was 20, 21 years old. And the same applies to our leaders. Any I want to reassure especially the supporters of resistance, the martyrdom of any of our commanders, we quickly fill in the vacuum. Quickly. With whom? With jihadi leaders. The students of those commanders, the students of Haj Omar Mughniya and Fuad Shukr and Mustafa Badruddin and the others. We have an excellent generation of jihadi leaders who can take up the responsibility, whatever be the sacrifices made. So, when it comes to the goal of the enemy, this goal will not be achieved. And Haj Mohsen has reached the result he wanted. No doubt that he had a passion for martyrdom. I, for 10 months, meaning since the start of Al-Aqsa Storm, I was in daily contact with him, hour by hour, because practically he was the one who was managing the situation with the brothers in the south. He was managing the daily operations. And so we used to meet together, sit down, speak at length from time to time. When the leaders, the martyrs, were martyred, those people who fell with him, he was impacted psychologically because he used to love them. In one of those meetings, look, this very firm, courageous person, Sayyid Fuad, is known in our formations, the firmness, the strength, the bravery. He was never shaken. But when he spoke about the martyrs and martyrdom, he would weep. Don't be surprised. Our colleagues, they weep. However courageous, however firm they may be, they weep. Why? He said, is it possible I'll stay here and manage the situation? He always requested a martyrdom operation. Most of those who are martyred in the operations of resistance, most of them, he was the one who raised them. They were his students, his friends. They were young. He taught them in the mosques. He gathered them together, sat down with them, etc. And he always missed them. He always spoke about them. Is it possible that I, in the end, would die on the bed, or from a stroke, or another reason? How? That was his spirit. So today, for example, many of the brothers, they say the psychological, the sentiments of this person or that person, or for their brothers, their friends. No, on the contrary. That was his wish, the martyrdom. That was his goal, personally. And it is the wish and the goal of many of those honorable mujahideen who look forward to being with God and believe, are confident in the promise of God Almighty. And maybe the time has come for him to join his comrades, the first group which started. I saw in the images which they downloaded, in one of them, he's standing in the middle, Sayyid, to his right is Sayyid Mustafa, Sayyid Dhul Fiqar, and to his left is Haj Imad. These three comrades were together since the outset. Some of their comrades are still alive. May God preserve them. But this is one of the most important, or these are some of the most important figures, beginning figures in the resistance. Of course, there's a long history. There's not enough time, because if we want to speak about Sayyid Fuad, we need hours. And God willing, we will hold a commemoration and an honorable ceremony for this leader, this commander, and I'll speak about him in detail. Now, let's leave it to what was distributed. He belonged to the generation that established the party, the first fighters. He fought in Khaldi, in Waza'i, in the first formations which fought. He was one of the first founders of the Islamic resistance formations in Lebanon. He managed many of the operations in the south, especially the unique operations, without going now into the details. And until his martyrdom, he was always in the leadership of resistance, managing, planning, implementing, building the capabilities. One of the most important capabilities which the resistance enjoys today, was as a result of the efforts of Sayyid Fuad, especially when there was cooperation with the Mahdi, the commander Haj Imad, and especially after Haj Imad's martyrdom. And Sayyid Fuad, just for the world to know, he has a great history in taking responsibility and had no problem. The first time when he became a central military commander in Hezbollah, or the first such commander, was Sayyid Fuad, and then he took up other responsibilities. Wherever he was requested to go, he would go. He had no reservations whatsoever, meaning he was the central military official. He left this position. You know, when I spoke about some Mahdi's like Mahdi Abu Talib, I said that he was one of the colleagues who went to Bosnia and stayed 2 or 3 years in Bosnia. Today, I want to reveal that the commander of the Hezbollah team or group that went to Bosnia, which included Mahdi Abu Talib and included Mahdi Ala, who we call Ala the Bosnian, the commander, the person responsible for this team and who was present with them for a long time in Bosnia, was Sayyid Fuad, Sayyid Mohsin, when he went to support those who were subject to oppression, who were in danger of being slaughtered and being subject to horrific massacres in Bosnia. He left Lebanon and went to Bosnia. And then he came back to take up complete responsibility. I can't speak, as I used to say, usually it's difficult. On the one hand, you want to describe this jihadi commander and speak about his achievements, and on the other hand, you can't reveal these achievements and the truth of the situation, because we're still in the midst of the battle and the enemy might benefit intelligence-wise, and also its morale might be boosted as a result of these achievements. In any case, the discussion about Sayyid Mohsin is a long one. I'll leave that to later. Now, regarding the main and final stance. Now, what now? First of all, I said that we've entered a new phase. The pressure on all the fronts so that the resistance in Palestine would surrender, it won't surrender. That's the stance of the leaders of Hamas after the martyrdom of leader Haniyeh. That stance is clear, because the aim of Netanyahu is that Hamas in Gaza would say, okay, here are the prisoners, these are our weapons, do what you want in Gaza, plan for the next day, we surrender. That will not happen at all. Neither surrender in Gaza, nor in Lebanon, nor in Yemen. That won't happen, not at all. And all of the pressures which will be exerted now on Iran and on the other supportive fronts, under the pretext of rationality. And where is this international community? The massacres, the daily massacres never stop. They speak about the killing of children. The biggest hypocrisy and arrogance which the whole world witnessed was Netanyahu when he was speaking in front of Congress and the Americans were applauding him. Are there lies? Is there hypocrisy more than this? Is there deception more than this? All of these pressures will be to no avail. If there is anyone in the world who indeed doesn't want the region to go to an even worse situation, they must really put pressure and force Israel to stop its aggression on Gaza. There's nothing else to say. Whoever you may kill, whatever you may destroy, and if you announce or declare a war here or there, if you used your full force, if you crossed all red lines, regardless of what we do, there won't be a solution except an end to the aggression on Gaza. That's number one. Number two, I want to separate between issues, because yesterday and today I requested from the brothers in the south, let's be calm to absorb the situation. We have the funeral procession for Al Mahdi. We have to look carefully at the stance we would take. So yesterday and today there was calmness except for some violations. I want to separate between two issues, going back to normal on the Lebanese battlefront, and this will return tomorrow morning, God willing. It'll go back to the situation which existed before the martyrdom of Sayyid Fuad. We have made the necessary arrangements, there is no problem, and we will resume this supportive activity. This has nothing to do with the retaliation to Sayyid Fuad. Tomorrow, when you hear that we targeted positions and tanks and vehicles and killed soldiers, this has nothing to do to the retaliation to Sayyid Fuad, and it is not a response, and not a first preliminary response to Sayyid Fuad. This will be a continuation in the normal battle, whereby the martyrdom of Sayyid Fuad was one of the big prices which was paid. The second issue, just for it to be clear, the second is a retaliation to this crime. This crime, which I once again say, an aggression on southern Beirut, killing of civilians, women and children, and the killing and the assassination of the senior jihadi leader Sayyid Fuad Shukr. For us, for all of those who are discussing with us in the world and who are contacting and who are talking, they know that the resistance cannot but respond. That's clear, not up for debate. Everything which is being said is, brothers, be careful, let the retaliation be acceptable, etc. And they try to minimize the aggression and the true nature of the aggression which took place against us and against Lebanon and the southern Beirut and the people in southern Beirut and the resistance. Today, I don't want to use a lot of words. In one sentence only, the enemy and those who stand behind the enemy must await our coming retaliation, which will be certain, God willing. The enemy and those who stand behind the enemy must wait for our upcoming retaliation, which will certainly come about, God willing. There is no debate regarding this, and the days and the nights and the battlefield separates us. Today, ever since the martyrdom of Hajj Sayyid Muhsin, and now after the assassination of the leader Hajj Hani, you know the entity is in the highest state of alert. The Air Force is in the highest state of alert, the Army, the reserves, they stopped giving the reserves vacation. There's evacuations in Akka, in Haifa, elsewhere. They opened the bomb shelters. And now, because they started a problem with everyone, they don't know where the retaliation now will come from northern Palestine, from eastern Palestine, from southern Palestine. Will this retaliation come at the same time, or will it come in different phases? Israel doesn't know where it's headed. In any case, to the brothers and sisters and the supporters of resistance, because now, of course, some people will focus on the morale. These silly people, okay, these silly people, they sit down and look at their watch and say, what have you done? When will you respond? Put these people aside. They aren't even human beings to be considered as humans, because Al-Aqsa storm revealed that there are certain people who aren't humans, but something else. Ethically, mentally speaking, this resistance, the axis of resistance today, what is new, what has become new for years, this is something we have to all keep in mind, is fighting with rage and in a rational way at the same time, with rage and with wisdom and with courage and with bravery, and it possesses the capabilities. Hence, We are the ones who go forward and choose. I'm not saying that we reserve the right to retaliate at the appropriate time and place. Not at all. We will retaliate. That is something decisive. And they must wait. They must wait the days and the nights on the battlefield. For us, as I said, now the decision is on the battlefield. And the battlefield knows its circumstances and its opportunities. And we are looking for a real response, not a formal response, like some people try and say. No, we're looking for a real retaliation, real opportunities, and a carefully, very carefully calculated retaliation. And I'll leave it at that. In any case, together, we will continue on the path of this leader, will continue on the path of all of these commanders, the martyrs. Their blood increases our responsibility, makes the burden heavier, isn't it so? When it comes to the enemy, and we are still in the days of Muharram, and Zainab and Zainab's siblings are taken from country to another to be taken to Yazid, the killer of Hussein, may peace be upon him, to say, and today we say to the Zionists, if you want, via killing the commanders and intimidating people and killing men, women and children, if you want to wipe away our memory and end our battle, you're mistaken. We say to them, as our Sayyida Zainab, may peace be upon her, said, express as much hatred as you want. Do whatever you can. Do whatever you want, Netanyahu. You and the Americans who stand behind you, be it Biden or Harris or Trump, whoever. The Americans, they're all the same, my friends. They're all the same. Express your hatred as much as you want. Do whatever you want. I swear by God, you will not wipe away our memory or our vigilance. And have you, is this only your plan? And in the end, your days are numbered. God willing, God and the men of God on all the battlefronts will stand forward, will stand and step forward. To our martyr, we don't say farewell, but we say see you later. See you later with the victory of this blood against the sword. See you later in martyrdom, in being with the beloved, and may peace be upon you all.
الجهادي الكبير السيد محسن جميعا الوقوف في أماكنهم وعدم التدافع. الصلاة.
You're just joining us. See, these are live images out of Beirut, Lebanon. Memorial service being held for Hezbollah commander Fuad Shukr, assassinated a couple nights ago in Lebanese capital Beirut by the Israeli regime. A very decorated, a long committed resistance commander and fighter for the Lebanon resistance movement. Hezbollah, one of the top commanders that the movement has, and you can see the outpouring for his passing. These are in the bottom of your screen. There are many Hezbollah members, and then you can see dignitaries and a lot of people from various walks of life there in the background paying their respects to the martyred Hezbollah commander. Here on Press TV, we have been covering the martyrdom of both Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran by the Israeli regime on the morning of July 31st, and the previous day we lost Fuad Shukr from Hezbollah there in the southern suburbs of the Lebanese capital, Beirut. We just heard Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah Secretary General, paying homage to the slain resistance leaders, both Ismail Haniyeh of Hamas and Fuad Shukr of Hezbollah, saying that they gave their lives, both political, personal, and their military years, for their people, and for their people's preservation of identity, preservation of Lebanese and Palestinian soil, culture, sovereignty, and future, that both men could not have had a better death to be martyred while in the service of God. On a side note, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah said that we as Hezbollah always claim our attacks, even if we mistakenly hit a civilian target, and that we did not hit Israeli-occupied Syrian Golan Heights, leaving 12 children dead at Majd al-Shams, the pretext used by Israel to assassinate Hezbollah commander Fuad Shukr. Nasrallah said, unlike the Israelis, we have the courage to be honest about our actions, that it wasn't us, and Israel should be ashamed of fabricating this lie and pretext that it has, and as also should be ashamed some Arab media outlets for accepting and running with the Zionist account of that incident. That was Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, live from Beirut, Lebanon, joining us earlier, or joining us, rather I should say, as we covered his address here on Press TV, his live address on the commemoration of the lives and legacy left by Hezbollah's Fuad Shukr and Hamas's Ismail Haniyeh. Joining us right now, live from Beirut, is Ali Risk, writer and political analyst we have on the line. Hello, Ali, pleasure to have you on. Hope you're safe and doing well out there in the Lebanese capital. Massive outpouring that we have seen for Fuad Shukr there in Lebanon. A huge ceremony, an outpouring of support, people coming to pay homage. Your thoughts on his legacy, and perhaps you know the man better than I do, Ali Risk. Did you know there's going to be this level of outpouring for his martyrdom?
First of all, I don't know the man better than you do. No, actually, many of these people, many of the Lebanese don't know these figures, these very senior figures in Hezbollah. We just heard a small description about the lifetime of this figure, particularly the role, for example, which was mentioned, the role he played in Bosnia, when there was a group of Hezbollah fighters who were sent to fight over there. It's interesting that Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah's description of Fuad Shukr was very much consistent with the Israeli description. If you recall, when the Israelis first announced the assassination, they said that he's considered to be the number 2 figure, the military advisor of Sayyid Hassan. Sayyid Hassan didn't deny that in this speech. He said that he used to meet with Fuad Shukr on a daily basis. They used to discuss the situation. I think that speaks volumes of the seniority of this figure, to meet on a daily basis with Hezbollah's Secretary General. And that brings me to why, or one of the reasons why there will be a strong reaction. If you noticed in Sayyid Hassan's remarks there, after describing the feats or the achievements of Fuad Shukr, he then said there will be a real retaliation, saying that these normal cross-border operations, which you're going to see on a daily basis starting off tomorrow, or which will resume tomorrow, are different than the operations or the retaliation to the aggression on Fuad Shukr and then the aggression on southern Beirut in general. He was very careful to say that this wasn't just an assassination, it was rather an aggression in the Lebanese capital which led to civilians. He said there will be a real, at the same time, a very carefully calculated, and I think these two expressions, or these two sentences, were the main highlight of the speech, meaning that you're going to see a very strong reaction from Hezbollah, which would go beyond any action the group has taken since October 8th, since the latest round of confrontation started, but at the same time carefully calculated. So that leads us to a question: will it be a strong retaliation, but at the same time designed in a way which will not give the Israelis a pretext to launch a wider war? I think that is the biggest question which is now posed. As I said, judging from the expressions and the words which he chose, I think you'll see a painful blow being inflicted on the Israelis, but one designed in a way not to make Hezbollah look like the party which lured the situation or dragged the situation to an all-out war.
And in a stark contrast to Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, Said Hassan Nasrallah is extremely protective, Ali, of civilian populations. You know, the dozens upon dozens, hundreds, we could say at this point, over the last 10 months of Hezbollah attacks on Israeli targets, they've all been military installations. He tries to keep it a military game. These cross-border attacks, like I said, starkly different from what the Israelis have done. Anything for them seems, as we've seen in Gaza and southern Lebanon, is a fair game. But say it to your point, not just with Lebanese civilians, but with anyone in this conflict, he tries to keep this thing a strictly military mission and keep civilians excluded.
That's been Hezbollah's approach, by the way, even before October 8. In 2006, Hezbollah's approach is to spare civilians. Now, in 2006, Hezbollah missile fire did lead to the death of Israeli Arab civilians, by the way, and Hezbollah came out and apologized for that and said it was a mistake. So that's Hezbollah's doctrine, right? It's to spare civilians. Incidentally as well, speaking about civilians, I think one of the reasons behind Hezbollah's rather restrained cross-border activity in this current round of confrontations goes back to Hezbollah not wanting to have the Lebanese people suffer from an all-out war. You know that Lebanon is in a dire situation economically. I myself spoke to Hezbollah officials who emphasized this point, that Hezbollah will strive as much as possible to prevent the situation from being dragged to an all-out war unless Israel is the one which imposes such a war. What I've also heard from Hezbollah officials is that the Americans are even aware of this, meaning that the Americans say behind closed doors that Hezbollah is behaving more rationally and is exercising self-restraint more than the Israelis, who behave, or at least in this current conflict, don't appear to have a strategic approach to the situation and are behaving irrationally, stemming from blind ideology, if you like, a thirst for blood, a thirst for vengeance after the October 7 attacks. And if you noticed as well in his remarks, he said that we are a group, or we are parties that fight with rage, but with wisdom, with rage, but with rationality. And I think that here there's a very, very big difference with the Israeli approach, which doesn't appear to show any wisdom or strategic vision, but which only stems from rage.
Interesting. Ali, let me also welcome Saad Nimr, Professor of Political Science out of Birzeit University from occupied Ramallah. Hello, Professor. And for your viewers that are showing us, that are just joining us, these are live images out of Beirut. And now we have a quad screen there. These are protests in a condemnation of Israel's attacks on resistance leaders Ismail Haniyeh and Fuad Shukr of Hamas and Hezbollah, respectively. And those are live images out of Beirut. People have been chanting for retaliation, support for Hezbollah, and retaliation for the martyrdom of Fuad Shukr there in Lebanon. And throughout the afternoon here on Press TV, we have been covering the memorial for Fuad Shukr there in the Lebanese capital. Welcome to the conversation, Saad Nimr. Professor Nimr, the whole world wants to see a ceasefire in Gaza, and here you are, the Israeli regime targeting civilian areas in Tehran and Beirut, extremely provocative, illegal assassinations of two top resistance figures. Help us assess Tel Aviv's actions and intentions at this point in the game with these last two assassinations by the regime.
Well, first of all, good afternoon for you and your guests and your viewers. What's going on now? It's that after especially the speech of Samahat Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, it's quite clear now that the retaliation is coming on. And I believe that Netanyahu's action against Tehran and Beirut, two capitals, he's trying to deliver a kind of a victory for the Israelis, to say we are achieving something. The problem with Israel now, that the shape, or if you like, the method or the example of victory, which used to be for the Israelis in previous wars, such as 1967, when they have the pictures behind the Al-Buraq wall and in front of Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, after the occupation of Jerusalem after 1967. That was the picture of the victory. And after the 1973 onward war, there is no such a picture of victory. So the only kind of victory now the Israelis are trying to deliver is this assassination, whether it's over these last 40 years. We are talking about more than 120 of Palestinian leaders who were assassinated by the Israelis. And apparently now this is the way that the Israelis celebrating their victories in a way or another, by assassinating these people. However, we say that because Netanyahu wants to cover for his failure in Gaza, this war, which they estimated from the very beginning, it will take them only 2 months to end Hamas permanently. Now it is 10 months and Hamas is still fighting in Gaza. So the failure of the Israeli army and Israel in general, even in their targets, when they say that they want to eliminate Hamas on the one hand and to liberate all the prisoners kept captive by the Palestinian resistance, failed miserably. So the only thing that he could do now is to deliver some kind of a victory, to say to the Israeli public, look, we have assassinated Shukr and in Beirut, and we assassinated Haniya in Tehran. And he didn't care about the reaction. Now the whole international community, what's so-called international community, especially Western countries and some stupid Arab countries, are trying to talk to Iran and try to talk to Hezbollah that the reaction shouldn't be, so much that will create. Where were you when Netanyahu is killing the Palestinian civilians and Palestinian children in Gaza? Why you didn't say that to Israel? Why you didn't pressurize Israel rather than now pressurizing the Palestinian resistance and the Iranian government as well as Hezbollah in Lebanon? This is unbelievable. It's okay and fine that Netanyahu do this kind of assassination, but at the same time they wanted to, the Lebanese and the Iranian and the Palestinians and the Houthis in Yemen and the Iraqis to restrain. It's unbelievable how these Western countries are thinking. If you want a regional war, we are ready for it. You are not ready for it. And I think that Netanyahu is trying to implicate even the Americans with a kind of a regional war. He don't care. He didn't care at all, neither for the people who are going to die, nor for the countries might be destroyed. He cares only about his position and to show that he's a victorious and he's a hero in the eyes of the Israelis. Because of that, I think now it's quite clear. The Iranian had said it, we are going to retaliate. Hezbollah said it quite clearly, we are going to retaliate. The Houthis also in Yemen, they said that we didn't retaliate yet for Hudaydah attack. So I believe that Israel had, inflicted all that on itself. They have to now take responsibility for their actions and to wait for, this retaliation.
Thank you, Professor. And Ali, you want to weigh in on that? I mean, a ceasefire at this point for the Israeli regime means you get your captives back, you get to stop killing women and children in Gaza, which has inflicted irreparable damage to the little left of what the image had of the Israeli regime. There's no more Hezbollah attacks, no more Iraqi resistance attacks. To Professor Nimmer's point, no more attack by the Ansarullah or Gaza resistance groups. How is that not the best option for the Israeli regime? Ali, help us understand that.
I think you have to separate between what's the best option for Israel, what's the best option for Netanyahu. The best option for Israel is, as you said, to put a stop to the attacks. It's endangering, it's leading to the erosion of Israel, by the way, not just these attacks which are taking place from Yemen, from Lebanon, elsewhere. Look at the social situation. Look at what happened when these protesters led by far right went in and raided a place where Israeli soldiers were being interrogated after being accused of violations against Palestinian prisoners. So at all dimensions, the status quo, the continuation of the fighting does undermine Israel. But Netanyahu, I think, has other things in mind. Netanyahu, first of all, has his own political career, his own legal challenges. We all know about that. The far right will threaten to resign from power if he stops the war. And I think that Netanyahu also, maybe to a lesser degree than Ben Gvir and Smotrich, but nevertheless, shares the same ideology, or is behaving according to ideology and not according to strategic calculations. So this, I think, explains a lot if you want to understand why Israel is continuing to stall the processes and is continuing the war and continuing to thwart and obstruct the reaching of a deal. At the same time, I think the Americans, their indecisive stance also is allowing Netanyahu to do this. And in fact, I think that the lack of decisiveness on the part of the Americans has only increased due to the developments taking place in America. Biden withdrew from from the presidency. Now there appears to be some kind of vacuum within the US. And Netanyahu received an unprecedented, I think, in US Congress, an unprecedented standard ovation from American legislators. Not all of them, but a large number, particularly from Republicans. And I think that is one reason why he opted to escalate upon his return from Washington, striking here in southern Beirut, that strike also in Tehran, which Israel hasn't admitted to, but it's almost certain that it's the one which is behind it. Those factors, the Israeli stubborn ideological approach, and the lack of decisiveness on the part of the Americans, the American divisions between Republican and Democrat, the ovation, the reception which Netanyahu received in Washington, not only is that enabling Israel to continue, it's enabling Israel to escalate. As I said, just right after coming back from Washington, these two simultaneous strikes on Beirut and on Tehran.
And we're going to come back to that, his U.S. trip. But first, I want to put this question to Mr. Assad Nimr. Yesterday at the Security Council, the emergency meeting on these assassinations, the Palestinian temporary envoy, that young lady, said that violence and terror is Israel's only currency, that the regime doesn't respect international law, any red lines, does not try to use diplomacy or compromise to reach any of its objectives. And I want to ask you, and we know that the regime is very desperate to gain legitimacy as a state, as a democratic state, as it proclaims. So why does it not see it as a fundamental necessity to get its act together and behave and fall in line with international law?
Well, there's two things here we can talk about. The first thing, that they know that Americans are going to support them always, and they are not going to fail them, whether it's in the diplomacy, in the United Nations and its organizations, or on the ground by this war. And they know always that the strategic relationship between Israel and the United States is absolutely, untouchable, in spite of the fact that sometimes there is some problems between the administration and the Israeli government. However, it's so clear, especially after the visit to the Congress and all these cheers came to Netanyahu, that he feels that still the United States is behind him and he's supported by the United States. And if he thinks in this way, then he don't care at all about the rest of the international community, nor about the resolutions. We are talking about more than 700 resolutions in either in the United Nations Assembly or in the Security Council, and Israel didn't comply even with one, because always there is either the veto or the support by the Americans and the pressure of the Americans on even the ICC and the ICG in order to not to inflict any kind of punishments against Israel. So this is one issue. The second issue, it's the mentality of colonialism, which is all the Israelis now have, not only Netanyahu and his right-wing government, but also even in the opposition in Israel. I'm talking about Israel as an entity, Israel as a project. They have this colonial mentality, and this colonial mentality, which is based on racism, based on violence, and based on occupation and ethnically cleansing the Palestinians, and most importantly, that they feel that they are civilized and all other people are not civilized. So we are not, as Palestinians, civilized from their point of view, and that's the democracy of Israel, because they are civilized. And that was so clear also in his stupid speech in front of the Congress, when he insists on that this war is between the civilized and the uncivilized. So he this is the colonial mentality, and when you have a colonial mentality, you don't care. And definitely the Western countries, and especially the United States and other Western countries, they have the same mentality, which is the mentality of colonialism. So definitely they are going to support Israel and not going to punish Israel or even to tell Israel something else. So it's the same mentality, and we are facing this kind of mentality on the ground by the killing of all these people, which is justified by Netanyahu and by the Western countries, because they are the civilized and we are the uncivilized. So it's like, legal for Netanyahu and his government to do what they are doing in Gaza and to do these assassinations, since they are targeting from their perspective terrorists and, all these kind of lies that they are creating. And this bunch of Western countries are, believing them and following them and supporting them in whatever they are doing. And we are paying the price. So it is about time now that Israel should be responsible for its, to take responsibility for its actions and to be punished in the only way that also as a people we know.
Thank you, Professor. I'd like to also welcome now in our Tehran studio, sitting next to me, Mr. Hamid Shahriari from the World Forum for Proximity of Islamic Schools of Thought. Mr. Shahriari, welcome to the conversation. Why do you think that the Zionist entity chose to martyr two top resistance figures in the last 2 days, when the entire world wants to see a ceasefire? Why do you think the Israeli regime is choosing a completely different path toward more violence, toward a more provocative escalation of tensions in West Asia?
In the name of God, the Beneficent, the Merciful, greetings to you and your esteemed viewers. I think that Israel is now facing a deadlock, and it's hard for the Israeli regime to get out of this deadlock. It seems that Israel is facing insanity and madness, and because of that madness, it commits such crimes. From the point of view of the Israeli regime itself as an occupation and occupying regime, Israel has no other choice but to accept the failure, and acceptance of failure in a natural way is hard and tough for this regime. Over the history of the Israeli regime, it has a number of wars, and it has tried to portray itself as victorious, but it's very natural and obvious that no other interpretation of this regime's victory is now imaginable by the public opinion, and this this fake portrayal of this regime is unacceptable. They cannot present this fake portrayal like the previous wars. Obviously, in this regard, Netanyahu, Israeli Prime Minister, is involved in such defeats and failures, and because of these defeats, Netanyahu is trying to get out of such deadlock, although it might not seem logical. We think that these are not reasonable, these moves are not reasonable, which will result in the regime's failure. So in the face of the Israeli war on Gaza, they promised to wrap it up within 2 months, 3 months. They promised to release hostages. They promised to, and they vowed to annihilate Hamas. And let me say that they vowed to occupy and capture the land controlled by Gaza, but none of them delivered. And because of those failures,